Good evening and welcome to another episode of the AFC East Bros podcast with Kyle and Gary. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kyle Smith, alongside my older brother, Gary Smith, the Buffalo Bills fan. I am the resident New York Jets fan, and we are two brothers, and we talk about the AFC East week in, week out. We are diehard fans of our own respective teams, but we like to think that overall, we're pretty unbiased. Overall, we say it like it is. It's a challenging task, a challenging endeavor that we've set out on. But we try our very best at it, Gary. And, it's almost been about 1 full year that we've been doing this show now, and I'm very pleased with how it's going thus far.
As am I, Kyle. Always good quality time with my younger brother. And we get to talk about things we love, which is the Buffalo Bills and New York Jets, and our two foes, the Dolphins and the Patriots.
You can make that 3 foes, because the Buffalo Bills are certainly a foe for me, and I know that the New York Jets
You don't root for them a little bit? You don't root for them just a little bit, Kyle? Rex Ryan?
I definitely root for them when they're playing the Patriots, and I think I root for them when they're playing the Dolphins as well.
All right, well, there you go. And let me tell you something. I have a little special place in my heart for Chan Gailey and Fitzmagic, but definitely when they play the Bills, they are not a team I typically enjoy rooting for.
Fair enough. So there's a bunch to talk about now. We are now 2 preseason games in for each team. We're going on to preseason week 3, which is the big one. Now, if you were to ask Bill Belichick about week 3 of the preseason, and I'd have to agree with Bill, to be honest, he would say, he kind of scoffed when some people had asked him, do you treat the preseason game 3 as being similar to a regular season game? And he's like, I don't even think they're in the same universe. Because obviously you're not game planning for it. There's none of that. But, you do play the starters more. Typically you might play them 3 quarters. It's the livest of live action, more so than any scrimmage that you're going to get at a team practice. This is your big gear up for the actual regular season. Some guys like Sammy Watkins hasn't even played in a preseason game yet. Same thing with Matt Forte. But both of the respective head coaches for both of those teams expect such players to play in this preseason game.
Yeah, this is the dress rehearsal coming up, Kyle, as I like to call it. And me personally, I would keep it almost the same way as it's already been. I would like to just have a few series and then, get my starters off the field. But most coaching staffs feel like, hey, we got to suit up and we got to get ready for week 1. So this is it. I don't feel that way, especially the snake-bitten injury history the Bills have. I'm almost like just sit them all or put them in bubble wrap so they don't get hurt. But, like I said, this is pretty much the closest we get to regular season football is week 3 of the preseason. Yeah,
for sure. Let's start off by talking about some Miami Dolphins again, because typically we give them the shaft more than the other 3 teams, and we're going to try our very best to stop doing that. But let's talk about some of the positives and negatives that we saw out in AT&T Stadium, out in Big D. And one positive that was so apparent, jumped off the page for me, was Ryan Tannehill throwing on the run. He makes a beautiful down-the-field throw to Kenny Stills. Kenny Stills is probably, I think he's running a corner route on the play. And this is something that, people have been saying for years. Ryan Tannehill is one of the better quarterbacks in the entire league at throwing on the run. And we talked about this when Max Himmelrich of the Deep End Miami was on our show, that this is one thing that you can expect Adam Gase to incorporate. As Joe Philbin wasn't the hugest Ryan Tannehill fan in the world. There was rumors that he wanted to draft Derek Carr in the draft and wanted to part ways with Ryan Tannehill, despite the fact that they were kind of, almost joined at the hip since the inception of those two in Miami. But regardless, Max was saying that this is something that you can expect Adam Gase to do, and being that it's a preseason game and we're seeing him doing that, to me that seems like we will see more of it in the actual regular season because, typically coaches don't show their hand unless it's something they really want to work on. But the fact that they're doing it, it's not like it's an abnormal play. It's not like it's a trick play like for example, the Julian Edelman, double pass in the divisional game of the playoffs. It's not something like that you'd want to hide, but maybe let's get some work with it. So I think that we're definitely going to see more of this in the regular season. I think that it will bode well for Miami.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the rolling out, Kyle. That's something that Max really pointed to, that how good he is when he is on the run and rolling out. And I think that is something they got to emphasize, because Kyle he throws a crisp ball when he's on the run, and you can't do it every single time he drops back and pass. You can't do it every time, but geez, I tell you right now, if what Max is saying and what we saw in the preseason this past week, I would look for the Dolphins to do a lot more of that.
For sure. Now let's talk about some negatives. And one thing that stood out to me was something that I actually brought up last week. Jarvis Landry had a couple drops in this game. Maybe some weren't all his fault. He did kind of slip on one route, and the ball kind of came to him at a weird angle. But you could say he at least had one, maybe two other drops other than that. And this is a preseason game where you're not even playing that much. It's not like a huge, volume of passes were thrown his way, but yet we saw some more drops.
Yeah, and I don't know if that were you the one who said it last week, Kyle? Miami's, or where'd you hear that from? Miami's a place where receivers go to die. Their careers go to die.
Yeah, particularly their hands. I was actually quoting Oscar Hazel, our good buddy from the UK, who's a Dolphins fan, Dolphin podcaster.
Right.
This is something that he's been saying for a while now, and I kind of have to agree with him. You just think about, Jordan Cameron's obviously another one. He had terrible hands last year. Not to say that Mike Wallace had good hands. It certainly wasn't a strength of his game out in Pittsburgh, but his hands noticeably got worse when he went to Miami. So it's a trend that we've seen with the Dolphins.
Yeah, and Jarvis Landry is supposed to be the most reliable wide receiver. I noticed that too, Kyle. What do you think it is attributed to? The lack of concentration, maybe picking up a new offense? I mean, what do you think that is the trouble with Jarvis Landry? Because we saw a little bit of this last year. It kind of reared its ugly head, that he was dropping an unusual amount of balls. He was known at LSU as being a sure-handed wide receiver. His rookie season, 2014, kind of lit it up and known for having good hands. But last year, seems like there's been some lapse of concentration in Jarvis Landry lately.
Oscar has said that, one of his theories is that, Tannehill might throw like a low trajectory, and that might be the reason why some of these drops occur. And, that might make sense because of with a couple different people. But if you look at some of the drops with Landry last year, they seem to be just simple concentration drops. He's coming out on, and he's either running a flat route or a swing route. He's maybe coming out of the backfield on one play, and this is particularly in the London game. And Tannehill hit him right in the breadbasket. There wasn't particularly a lot of velocity on the ball. It was very catchable, nice spiral. And he just takes his eyes off the ball, and he drops it. And it's kind of like something that you'd see out of Brandon Marshall. We certainly saw this out of Brandon Marshall in the preseason game against the Redskins this past week. And to me, here's the thing, is Jarvis Landry's very good after the catch. There's no doubt about that. He runs super hard. You cannot take that away from him. But he is a slow guy, Gary. And if you compare the speed in college football compared to the speed in the NFL, it's night and day. And Jarvis Landry is not a fast player. So maybe in his mind he's thinking, I got to move ASAP after I catch this ball. He's already thinking about what move he's going to make because he knows that he lacks in the speed department. And maybe that's the reason that's leading to some of these concentration drops.
Yeah, you just hope that he's going to get it together soon because, for a team that is really, Kyle, starving for some answers on offense. I mean, Kyle, we've mentioned before Jordan Cameron, who's supposed to be a premier player for them. He's not shown well, even though I read today's practice notes that he had a nice touchdown in the end zone. And then you have Kenny Stills. You have a running back situation that's kind of a big question mark. You don't know what you're going to get with Foster yet, and J.J. I mean, to me, I don't view him as a true number one. So it's for someone who's supposed to be really reliable like Jarvis Landry, you got to be really concerned if you're the Dolphins because that's supposed to be at all costs your go-to guy, almost your safety blanket, your Anquan Bolden, so to speak, of the Baltimore Ravens. That's really what it comes up to be.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that he's not a number one. I did remember that Max Himmelrich had actually brought up that, he was asking the question, would you take Jarvis Landry over these receivers? And he started rattling off a few names, and one such name was Eric Decker. And in my mind, I would not take him over Eric Decker. I feel that Decker is the better downfield receiver. I feel that he's better that when you actually split him out wide. And in terms of what they can do in the slot, I view them as almost being the same type of player. And certainly in the red zone, Decker is much, much better than Landry. So I would take Decker. I know that Landry is the younger player. But, we've said this about Decker his entire career. If we're talking true number one, he's not that. And if he's not that, then Landry is certainly not that either.
Yeah, if you're going to ask me now, Kyle, if you're asking me to start a franchise and, he'd be available for the next 5 years, I would take Jarvis Landry. But if right here in the now, or even maybe the next 2 years, you're definitely taking Decker over Landry. I know a lot of Dolphins fans probably don't want to hear that. The only thing I would say that Landry has the advantage over Decker is probably in the special teams department. But either way, Decker's the better player.
Yeah, Landry is a good returner despite the fact that he doesn't have elite speed. And this is something that we've talked about a lot. Typically you think of someone could be a good kick returner if they have blazing speed. Not the case, because so much of it is, how you read your blocks. And that is something that Landry is certainly good at. And, this is something that me and you have argued about too. What was the best play that we saw in the AFC East last year? And you said the Jarvis Landry punt return for a touchdown against the Redskins in Week 1.
Yeah, I mean, just because what was riding on the line, and really they had nothing going since then. But you know what? We asked a lot of people in private, and we asked a lot of people on Twitter, and they said it was close. So, to your shock too, Kyle. But let's move on past Jarvis Landry. Kyle, can we have a name that one guy stood out? I have a name, and his name is not Arian Foster, and his name is not Jay Ajayi, Kyle. And I hope you're thinking about the same person as me. Is that even Kenyon Drake?
I think we are.
It's the former second-round pick from the defunct St. Louis Rams, Isaiah Pede out of the University of Cincinnati. Kyle really looked explosive. Looked like a man on a mission, really. I mean, and if you think about it, in such an uncertainty position for the Dolphins, having a guy who was a highly touted pick coming out of college, who's still pretty young, making some plays, he might have actually earned himself a roster spot. And I saw a Twitter poll go up, Kyle. Would you keep 4 of them? And today's NFL, it's very rare that you have 4 running backs on the roster. Some teams do have them, but a lot of teams like now that because the wide receiver is so heavily used, a lot of them like to keep more wide receivers on. But Isaiah Pede is making a name for himself. What were your thoughts on Isaiah?
Yeah, he catches that ball, and then he goes right down the sideline, and he happens to outrun some people. He also ran with a little bit of power. And if you think about it, I mean, I would say more so than any other position. Running back is a position where you can see undrafted guys thrive. You can see guys kind of resurrect their career. Think about the running back Forsett out in Baltimore. He had a couple okay years out in Seattle, and then the 2014 season out in Baltimore, he has the best year of his career. He's extremely efficient. So it's kind of one of those positions where you get in the right scheme, you can thrive despite the fact that you might be a little bit talent deficient or what have you. And Pede doesn't have the injuries that someone like Foster. I mean, let's be honest. Foster didn't get great blocking when he was in. But he looked like a shell of himself. He looked really slow out there, and he had a couple carries for -2 yards or whatever it was. I know he's behind. I know he's still kind of rehabbing off the Achilles injury, but that is a tad bit concerning. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. Kenyon Drake, he's also injury prone. And then Jay Ajayi, he's also kind of not impressed to the level that we want to see. So I think when you have those big question marks out there, you have to, if you're Miami, you have to really give Pede much more of a consideration, factoring in what he has done and your questioning marks with the other guys. When you combine both those things, I definitely think that he's going to make this roster.
Yeah, and you got Williams out there, Damon Williams. You got the former second-round pick Daniel Thomas of the Miami Dolphins. So I don't think he's
no chance. No chance.
Yeah. What I could say is that this, Kyle. So you brought in Foster. obviously, Tannenbaum, he drafted Jay Ajayi, and they've openly stated that he's going to be, definitely in the mix. You got this guy Pete, who's been making nothing but great plays for the Dolphins, and you got Kenyon Drake, and then you got those two other guys. And now Williams gives you something in the special teams. But my whole thing is this: Kenyon Drake, their third-round pick. Do the Dolphins give him almost like a redshirt year because of the emergence of Isaiah Pede? You think they pull the plug on him and put him on IR, given his injury history, given that, hey, he's lack of experience in the pros? And listen, let's face it, Kenyon Drake, Kyle, was known as being a good receiving back. And now you got this guy Pede, who looks like he's got sure hands, and he definitely has some zip to him. Maybe shelf the rookie. Would that be a train of thought for the Dolphins, especially with the roster spots you're given?
I'll say this, and we see that the phone lines are stacking up, and we'll get to the calls soon, is that, I hear this talk about stashing a guy on IR probably more than I've heard about, forever now. It seems like it's becoming more and more of a common thing, and this is something that the Patriots, I'm not saying they've invented it, but they certainly, made it mainstream, and this is something that they've been doing for years, is the Foxborough flu. We saw it with guys like A.J. Derby and, what's his name, Trey Flowers last year. Guys that kind of had, questionable injuries, and all of a sudden they're stashed on the IR for the rest of the year. You could even say that the Jets have done this in recent years with Shaq Evans, the receiver from UCLA that they drafted in the 4th round, and maybe they even did it last year with Jay Samaro. I don't think that he had a season-ending injury, but the fact of the matter is he was fat, he was sloppy, he wasn't producing in camp, so let's stash a guy on IR. Now, here's the thing is, a position like tight end, a position like cornerback, a position like quarterback, these are positions that it takes you a lot longer to learn, and you'd like to have that redshirt year where you're sitting the bench and kind of, learning the ins and outs before you actually step on the field. Running back is kind of the opposite. With running back, you have such a short lifespan in the NFL that it's more advantageous to get your carries early on in your career before, you get older. And this is so common that we see this in the NFL. A rookie will jump off the scene, and then 2 or 3 years, 4 years into the league, they're not what they used to be after the hits accumulate. So, he's a running back. It's easier to learn than those other positions, and I think you want to maximize his youth. So I don't know that stashing him on IR is something that would be very advantageous. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the more I think, I go back and forth. Honestly, I don't think Kenyon Drake's have a big role for the Dolphins this season, especially with Foster in the mix. I think Foster, had he not been there, you look at a lot of Jay Ajayi, and obviously the Dolphins didn't know what they had in Isaiah Pede, but you know what? I really like his story. Kyle, if you remember, Isaiah Pede really solidified himself as being a second-round pick during Senior Bowl weekend. He really had a tremendous game. I think he actually was the MVP of that game, if I'm not mistaken, and really boosted his stock up. And, I'm sure that Los Angeles, or back then St. Louis, would love to have him, given the Trey Mason incident that's going on over there. I'm sure they would love to have Isaiah Pede on their roster right now. But given all that, they didn't know what they had in Pede. Now they see it. Kenyon Drake really has not had a great camp. He's been nicked up. I maybe would pull the plug on him because he is a project. Even though he's a 3rd rounder, which is pretty highly touted, I just don't know where you squeeze him in, especially if you have Ajayi, you have Foster. We know those guys are staying, and Pede seems like he's almost a lock at this point. So I don't know. And Kyle, it also depends on what they deem for each spot, because you and I have gone back and forth on Twitter. How many Jets wide receivers are you going to keep? How many tight ends? Each coaching staff has pretty much a number in their head, and I don't know. Now, I will say this, is that if he does stick on this roster, I just don't know what kind of role he's going to have. I'm assuming that he will not suit up during game day, Drake, this year.
We'll see. I don't think he's going to have a big role. I don't think he's going to have a big impact. I've been on the record since day one. I don't think it was a good pick, and I don't think that he's going to be a great NFL player. But let's get to the phone. You're going to Biff Sweeney a little angry when you said that. That's his boy. Apparently, it's a couple people's boys. I think that Ron Caniff is also a big Kenyon Drake fan. So
I didn't see it either. I didn't see it either in college, but go on. But let's get to the phones.
Okay, we'll bring on our first caller.
Are you loyal to your team? 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 This team has taken me through my cancer and all my friggin' eye surgeries.
Wow.
And that's the bottom line. They keep me alive every day. And you know my personal story, Bob. So this story means diddly squat. Stay loyal to the Patriots. And that's all I got to say, Bob. I love you. I'm going to send you a personal message. And hopefully I'll see you in Phoenix.
All right, Nick Baby Love.
Hi, gentlemen. How you doing?
Doing excellent. How you doing?
You got my AC guy here. You know, thank God he's a Dolphins fan, and I always carry gear. And, you know, it's hot like you can't believe. I mean, it's 87 here. You know, it's crazy. You know what I mean? This is the hottest I remember since moving down in the 70s from Boston. It's crazy. You know what I mean? So.
What'd you say, 87, Nick?
It's 87 right now, yeah. Smoking hot, which I hope that's what the AFC East is.
Oh, it always is. But listen, that's baby stuff compared to what we have up in New Jersey. Last Saturday was 101.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but it's just that Caribbean, South, really humidity that's, off the chain. It's like, as hot as the Jets coaching over the years.
So, Nick, what's on your mind?
I'm checking in, man. I have mad love for the show. What I like is on my phone, I don't know what you did and what you do for the other callers and your enormous following there, which we want to build up. I did get an alert like I get from my radio people on my phone now, like a Google Calendar thing.
There you go. And Nick Baby Love, he's saying it on air for the first time. I've actually not announced this, Nick, is if I have your email address and you'd like to receive a notification about the show, just go ahead and send me an email over at afceastbros@gmail.com, and I'll add you to the list. And before we go live every Tuesday, and if we were to do another day as well, you'll get a notification that we are going to go live. And it'll be sent to your phone as well as your email address.
Yeah, so when I email you something, take all those other email addresses, like my guys, all my big Patriot guys, like Olivier and Melvin and all them. And
I got Olivier on there. But I'll add Melvin.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other people, but that is like my radio networking things. There's one actually every Tuesday at 8, and then Wednesdays that goes with various DJ groups across the country. So they do the same thing, and I was wondering. But, it was great to see that. In between me dealing with, like I said, my air conditioning and all that, and because I'm legally blind, I can't mess with nothing. So it could be as simple as a battery, you know what I mean? So, it is what it is, you know what I mean? Like I said, in Florida, we got to have the AC. But, what about this, I can say it on your show, this scumbag, Roger the Crook there. What about all this other stuff he's up to? To me, we got a great division, the AFC East. It's one thing after another with him. I just think he's such a fraud and such a fake, and it has nothing to do with Brady and, cut finger gate or whatever, all the latest drama. Just all the stuff like, Peyton Manning's the greatest and he's untouchable and he would never do PEDs. And then this other guy, from Pittsburgh, who I hate the Steelers. They're at the top of the list with the Broncos and the Giants. Those are the three teams that I just can't deal with at all.
Nick, are you referencing the Hall of Fame game incident with the field and how the NFL doesn't want to compensate the people fair ticket value for the fact that they missed a game, for the fact that, it was literally minutes before kickoff was about to be, people were filing in their seats and it says countdown to kickoff on the clock there. And the league had already, made the announcement, but they didn't tell the people in the stadium. And apparently they don't want to fairly compensate them. And obviously Roger Goodell is the face of the NFL. So is that kind of what your gripe is about?
No, yeah. I mean, that's one of them. But it was what James Harrison, one of the people, if the guys in the AFC East, especially the Patriots, would have called him whatever the blankety blank that he called them, crook, etc. James Harrison did that, about this whole PED thing and, this report and, it's one thing after another. I mean, in other words, the football players, except that I'm a big Brady guy, I laugh at them because that's something that never gets talked about. They signed the worst 10-year deal. You forget about the Iran deal and all the nuts that's going on in politics with that. That's the worst deal. The baseball players, they're like, the second coming of whatever, sliced bread, I mean, they're like got it made. And basketball, well, there's only a few players, but that collective bargaining agreement is nonsense, and this guy is a Gestapo. There's no other way to say it. I hate using the word, but he is. He is the lowest form of scum of the earth, and those fake hugs at the draft. In other words, thank you both again that I can't stand Roger Goodell. And so how come he didn't say nothing or punish James Harrison? Because he's trying to be politically correct?
I don't know, Nick. I don't know, Nick, but that's one of the problems that we have is too much PC around here. But I will say this. It's a fascinating discussion as to whether or not, the NFL players should be compensated more if their agreement is good. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about baseball, when you talk about basketball, there's just so much more injuries in the NFL, and there's so many more players on a roster that, it's interesting how much can you, pay a player, how much can you guarantee them. But maybe it's something that me and Gary can go into maybe a little bit more in an off-season show. Maybe we can dedicate a specific show just to that. But hey, Nick, we got to get to some other callers. All right?
No, it's all good, gentlemen. I mean, like I said, I hope all the teams get off to a good start in the AFC East, and the division rivalry games are going to be a lot of fun, And say hello to Dad, Gary Sr. for me, guys.
Will do, Nick. Thanks a bunch,
all right,
Nick.
Have a great show.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. All right, let's go to Nolan next. Nolan, this is Kyle and Gary, the AFC East Bros. What's up?
Hey, I'm just wondering, because you guys just talked about the how Jarvis Landry read the blocks well and got the punt touchdown. What is so bad about the offensive line in Miami? I'm a Patriots fan, so I only watched 2 games of the Dolphins last year.
Gary, I'll let you start with that one.
You talking about last year or this year, Nolan?
This year, 2015. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you right now, Nolan. It looks like, judging by the preseason games, looks like they will have a better offensive line performance than last year. I think, Kyle, you would agree with me on that. And I definitely think in the pass blocking department, they definitely will. They have looks like they have 2 tackles, Kyle, penciled in at the starting guard spots. I think Bushrod will get that right guard spot. And it looks like Tunsil has moved his way up the depth chart as the left guard. Still, they're not a solid offensive line, especially Pouncey. Looking like Kyle, he might miss this season. He seems like he can't be healthy. So, but I definitely think it's to be a major improvement from last year. And that's not saying much because Tannehill got creamed last year.
And how many times did he get sacked?
Well, over his first 4 years, there's no quarterback that's been sacked more than him, and it's really not even close, to be honest. So there's a myriad of problems. I mean, Brandon Albert, at certain stints in Miami, he's been a very good pass protector, but then he's had the ACL tear, and then he's never been the same player since. So when he's out, they've never been the same. Juwan James has been up and down. In my opinion, he's been more down. Pouncey's another guy who, Gary, you think he's going to miss this season. I didn't even hear about that. I did hear that he could miss the first couple games, but he's also been a guy who's been injured every now and then. And when he's out, like, think back to the Jets game. When the Dolphins came to MetLife Stadium last year to play the Jets, Pouncey went down mid-game, and then they put Jamil Douglas in at center. he couldn't keep a snap off the ground. Every time Tannehill's getting the ball, he's picking it up off the ground, and it's delaying his drop back. And, it completely disrupted the whole flow of the play every single time. So injuries have been one big thing. Another big thing is, for whatever reason, Joe Philbin he loved Dallas Thomas, and Dallas Thomas has been one of the absolute worst starting guards over recent years, but he kept putting him in for whatever reason. And even the first preseason game, Adam Gase had Dallas Thomas starting, and he was terrible. So when you factor in all the injuries, I don't think Miami has extremely bad talent on the offensive line. They certainly don't. Gary, we rank them second out of all the offensive line units in the AFC East, but we kind of put an asterisk there saying if they can stay healthy. So health has been a big thing, and then you've had a couple really bad players in at certain spots. When Jason Fox was out at right tackle last year, he was just god-awful. Gary, did you remember that spin move that Jerry Hughes put on him in Buffalo?
I'm so upset they let go of Jason Fox. Man, he made the game so much easier. I sent out a tweet earlier. It was like Antonio Cromartie. I'm sorry. I'm upset the Jets let him go. It just made games a little bit more easier. But listen, Kyle, there's no other team, I don't even think in the NFL, that has more first-round picks on the offensive line than the Miami Dolphins. And still, they're still middle-of-the-pack offensive line. Potential's great, but it just doesn't seem like they're going to be quite the team due to their offensive line. I definitely think there's going to be improvement there, but what kind of improvement, I don't know.
Hey, Nolan, I'm curious. How did you hear about the show?
PFW in Progress actually talked about it a little bit. I think one of you guys called in, and Nick Baby Love, too.
Yeah, we got to thank Nick Baby Love for the promotion. Yeah, I've called into PFW a couple times. I actually called in today, and I didn't get to ask my full question, but we're extremely grateful. Yeah, I love the guys at PFW in Progress. But what else is on your mind, Nolan?
How is the offensive line coach? Because I know the Patriots just got back Dante Scarnecchian, and hopefully, I know he can't just snap his fingers and then get the perfect offensive line, but it definitely helps quite a bit. So what is the coaching like in Miami?
Are you specifically talking about the offensive line in Miami?
Yes. Coaching
Gary, do you know who the offensive line coach is in Miami? His name's slipping my mind at the moment.
I'm trying to think of it right now. I remember I was looking at their coaching staff the other day. It'll come back to me.
We can say this, Nolan, is Joe Philbin, once upon a time, he was the former Dolphins head coach. He used to be an offensive line coach himself, so he actually had a lot of say in what was going on with the offensive line in Miami last year. And I think that, Dolphins fans would be very apt to say that he was one of the biggest reasons for their struggles over recent years. Oh, man, it's killing me who the offensive line coach is for the Dolphins currently. Obviously, they had Dan Campbell, who was a tight end, and I don't know if you want to consider a tight end part of the offensive line, but some Dolphins fans were out there saying that, Dan Campbell should actually be a viable head coaching candidate because some would say that he filled in admirably and the demeanor of the team was much more tenacious and much more hard-nosed with him in there versus Joe Philbin, and he was a former player himself. So, he's a really big tight end himself when he used to play, and I don't know that the offensive line blocking got any better when he was in there, but he certainly, I think you could say he was a good tight end coach. Most Miami Dolphins fans were very sad that he did go. They wanted to see him stick around as the tight end coach for Miami, but now he's back with Sean Payton, and he was actually with the 2009 Saints when they won the Super Bowl. He was a tight end actually, playing, and now he's coaching down there. So he was a good tight end coach if you want to consider tight end as part of the offensive line, but Joe Philbin. No, of course not.
Chris Forster is the guy, and he was actually the offensive line coach for the Redskins, during the Alfred Morris, heyday with Mike Shanahan and all of them. He was, and Kyle, the crazy thing is, this guy is the offensive coordinator. This guy is the offensive line coach currently for the Dolphins. He was the offensive coordinator for the Dolphins in 2004 when Dave Wanstead was there. So this is his second stint with the Dolphins.
Interesting.
Yeah, right?
Hey, Nolan, give us some thoughts about something Patriots-related before we let you go.
Well, speaking of the offensive line, did you guys hear about Sebastian Vollmer and Marcus Cannon? Their injuries?
I heard about Vollmer. I mean, is this canon? Is this news today with Cannon?
I think so. He has a broken hand.
Ooh.
Pretty sure. That might be Vollmer.
That
One
was,
of the two.
that was a couple of days ago with Cannon, Kyle, I believe that. And you know what? He can still play with that broken hand. He's out of a club, and it's obviously going to affect his play. But with Vollmer, that's a big blow.
I thought that was Mason that had the hand issue.
Yeah, it's Shaq Mason. That's what I'm thinking of.
Sorry. I get some of the names mixed up.
Yeah, it's all good. I will say this. I mean, our buddy Christian, who calls into the show every now and then, and Nolan, you'll be familiar with him from PFW in Progress, he absolutely hates Marcus Cannon. The PFW guys absolutely hate Marcus Cannon. Yeah. I did see this. Some people were posturing and putting this out there that when Scarnecchia was last the offensive line coach of the New England Patriots back in 2013, he made Marcus Cannon somewhat serviceable.
Right there.
Yeah, I saw some guy, Rich Hill, putting that out there as well. And the past 2 years, when you had, is his name, Dave DeGuglielmo as the offensive line coach, that's when you saw the big dip in Marcus Cannon's production. Personally, I mean, I didn't follow the Patriots very closely back in 2013, so I can't really comment on that specifically, but I mean, most people are very, very upset with the fact that, Cannon was going to step in and take major reps. But, Gary, you've been saying this. You've been very unimpressed with Sebastian Vollmer because a lot of people have been saying that Sebastian Vollmer is actually the best Patriots offensive lineman. But, Gary, I know that you're going to disagree with that.
Absolutely. And in fact, he really showed his true colors on how lack of an athlete he is, his limitations when he had to move over to the left side last year, Kyle. And really, I mean, we've never seen Brady get hit as much as he did last year, especially towards the end of the year. And Kyle, I was actually watching Nate Solder. I thought Nate Solder looked pretty shaky. I mean, their tackle situation with Cannon, Vollmer, and Solder, it's really not the ideal. And I don't think any of those guys are really cutting the mustard. I think that's a position where the Patriots, especially having a Hall of Fame quarterback and a guy who can win games for you quite easily, you got to keep that guy upright. And I think that's probably the weak link in the Patriots' armor besides Jimmy G for these 4 games is the possibility of their offensive line being weak as they were last year. I think that they got good pieces. I think Tooney is a solid player, but he's still a rookie. They picked up Cooper. They're hoping to get him back to his first-round status. I don't know if that's going to ever happen. He seems like the injury bug always bites him, and he's a shell of his former self. Shaq Mason is a one-dimensional player. He can only run block. He looks like he's improved in his pass blocking, but still not ideal. And Trey Jackson, Kyle, is a pass blocker, and he can't really run block. So the Patriots situation's all over the map with their offensive line. It's just not ideal for that team.
It's not pretty at all. And I will say this, is anyone that watches the Patriots closely, Nolan, I'm sure you know this, Gary, and I know this, you know that the Patriots' offensive line is their weakness. They're not good at all. No one who watches the Patriots closely is going to say that. But people that don't watch them closely, I think they have this persona that the Patriots' offensive line is at least serviceable because Brady doesn't take a lot of sacks. But here's the thing, is Brady's going to be out for those first 4 games. I think many more people nationally are going to see how bad this Patriots offensive line really is because Garoppolo is, you could say maybe he has an NFL arm, but he's slow at processing defenses at this stage of his career. So he's going to be holding on to the ball significantly longer than Brady, and therefore he's going to be more susceptible to hits than Brady would be.
The pretty much epitome of that is the Denver game. And I remember, which one of you guys is a Dolphins fan?
Neither of us are Dolphins fans. I'm a Jets fan and Gary's a Bills fan.
Sorry, I screwed up. I'm just thinking back to Week 17. It was the 3rd down play, and the Dolphins just completely enveloped Brady. It was terrible. He had no chance. It was 3rd and 13. That just made me cringe so hard watching that, and pretty much all of the Denver games.
And even the week before that, I mean, talk about the Jets game in Week 16. Brady went down for at least 3 sacks, and he was hurried a whole bunch more than that. So
I didn't get to see that game. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a chance to go watch it on replay, that wasn't a pretty one for Brady. I mean, he started to come on as late. He hit Gronk a couple of times later in that game, but it was ugly for him early on. And that's actually the game that Vollmer went down really early on, and you could just see the Patriots fans in the stadium. They're like, oh, my God. So,
yeah.
Anyway, Nolan, thanks a bunch for calling, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just got one more question before you guys turn me off.
Okay, what is it?
Is Ryan Fitzpatrick, does he have like that Jay Cutler-ish thing of being sacked and just going off on his offensive line?
I've never seen that, Gary. I mean, you watched all his snaps in Buffalo. Did you ever see that?
I've never once seen that guy lose his cool on any of his teammates. He's probably a pro's pro in my opinion, where he just really, even if they mess up on a play, he'll go to the sideline and coach them up, but he'll never Philip Rivers or Jay Cutler chew them out on camera. I think Fitzpatrick's probably one of the most stand-up guys in the league as far as that goes. I've seen him get pretty pissed at Brandon Spikes after a late hit. That's the only time I've really seen Fitzpatrick lose his cool.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys for having me on for a bit.
Oh, no problem, man. We appreciate you coming on, and we hope you do it again, all right?
Yep, I will every Tuesday. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we will get to none other than Mr. Chris Kruger himself. Mr. Kruger, what's up?
Just living the dream.
we got the champ in the building. The champ's here.
The champ of
that's right.
Oh yes, I was about to say the champ of what, but then it dawned on me, the hockey champ. Hey Gary, have you seen some of his hockey shots?
I have yet to see his hockey shots, and
I will say
apologize.
this: looks can be deceiving.
Oh, all right. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah,
exactly.
He can really.
I'll tweet you some videos of it. But Gary,
right.
I heard you last week. You called me out taking my trophy to Walmart. If I lived in a third world country like New Jersey, of course I'd take my trophy to Walmart. I took it to Wegmans. Oh,
big deal. Hey, listen. You know what? It kind of seems childish to me, Chris. I mean, it kind of reminds me back in the day, Kyle. There was a UFC fighter by the name of Tim Sylvia, and he won the heavyweight championship.
Oh, I know.
And he used to wear his belt to the club after he won. That kind of seemed like a childish move that Chris did. I don't know what you Western New Yorkers think you're doing, but
right, my Tuesday night adult team, we entered in the Buffalo River Cup, and we lost our first game of the tournament, and then we didn't lose the rest of the way, and we ended up winning. And I want to say the team that I've played with, we've entered a handful of tournaments. This is the second one that I've played with them in, and we won. I put down the deposit for our team, so I get to keep the cup. And so I was making jokes at the bar after we won, like, oh, I should probably just take it to Wegmans and fill it with fruit, and it's going to be my centerpiece on my kitchen table, which is exactly what it's doing right now.
Yeah,
that's what you can do, and you can do that when you're a single man.
Of course. It's the centerpiece to our recording studio.
There you go. I would Chris, I would just opt for the plastic fruit, because you know why? It's going to go bad in a couple of days, and you're not going to eat a bunch of lemons. I mean, it's probably just going to go in. You're probably going to use that as a garnish for Drew's beers, those lemons. So.
Now Drew drinks the beer when we record our podcast, and I have whiskey and Coke. So I will throw in limes.
My man. All right, cool.
Hey, Chris, I want to ask you this. Okay, go ahead.
No, Kyle, I'll let you shoot, because you're in the crossfires of Kyle, who's not the Bills fan.
All right, well, Chris, I want to get your take on this. And anyone who listens to this show with consistency knows that we have glowed over Karlos Williams on this show. When we were doing our AFC East running back rankings, we were talking about the uncertainty with the Patriots running back situation. We were talking about the uncertainty with Miami's running back situation. We were saying that Karlos Williams could be a number one on both of those teams respectively. And we were saying that, even though I love Bilal Powell, and Bilal Powell got, $3.5 million annually, the Karlos Williams, you'd probably have to give him the nod over Powell. I said that, Karlos Williams probably has more touchdowns in his first year than Bilal Powell has in his entire career, which is 4 seasons. So, Chris, were you upset at the release of Karlos Williams?
I actually was not. Some of the
I told you this is. And Chris, real quick, I'm not going to cut your answer short, but would you say the consensus? You're on the Buffalo Bills Fanatic, which is the BF Fanatic on Facebook, and you're also on Twitter. Wouldn't you say the consensus of the Bills fans were they weren't really upset? They were more shocked, but they saw why they did it.
Yeah, and I think I don't believe Doug Whaley when he says solely performance-based. Now, he went on that Twitter tirade maybe a week or so ago, and I think that had something to do with it, too. You know, he came into camp weighing in at 261, and in the media guide, he's listed at 229. So he's, 22 pounds overweight, and, he didn't get a good start to training camp because he was doing conditioning work, trying to work off the weight, and he was only in participating in drills for a week before we let him go. And say what you want, I think running backs are a dime a dozen these days, especially in the offense that we run, which is running back heavy. And I think it's kind of like Shanahan's offense from the late 90s, where you can just plug in a running back and you should be good as long as your offensive line is good. And I kind of feel like that way with the Bills.
You're an engineer, right? You're a certified engineer, right?
I do CNC machining, and
But do you have like a degree in engineering?
I have I have a certificate in machining, and I occasionally dabble in AutoCAD and designing things.
Okay, so, I'm just wondering,
not an actual degree.
That's basic math right there. You said 22 pounds. It's 32 pounds overweight.
Oh, well,
Kyle,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He's Professor Clump.
And doing math problems.
Either way, he's Professor Clump.
Yeah.
Professor Clump.
But Chris, and I'm going to give it to you real, and Chris is a buddy of mine, is no doubt I was upset. But I was more upset, Kyle and Chris, that the fact that Karlos really led it to his own demise. I think he got really too big for his own britches. And, some of the interviews, he was really smug and coming across like, hey, you know what, I'll take the weight off. This is no big deal. I'm Karlos Williams. And really, I thought, and really, Kyle, I'm being quite honest with you, I felt when we drafted Jonathan Williams and we had Mike Gillislee, and then when we brought in Reggie Bush, it kind of said to me, well, hey, listen, we could do without Karlos Williams. He's explosive. When he's on fire, he's on fire. But he was just becoming too much for the common Bills fans. I mean, it just seemed like one thing after another. The rant on Twitter, like Chris mentioned, was totally unprofessional. The things he said were horrible. And he said, oh, I'm just joking with the fans. Like Karlos Williams has this way of brushing things off like it's no big deal. But it's things you shouldn't be doing, especially being a fifth-round draft pick. And like Chris mentioned, this offense, you look at a guy like Mike Gillislee, who's never had success with the Dolphins. Here he is scoring touchdowns, Reggie Bush, I know, Chris, I don't know if you went to a few practices. I know Drew was at a few. But everyone I read to, Reggie Bush was hitting holes 100 miles an hour and looked explosive. And then, of course, he's not the bell cow. LaShawn McCoy is still the man in Buffalo. No matter what, Karlos Williams is still going to be the number 2 back. And Jonathan Williams looked really good the first preseason game. And, here's a guy who was supposed to go in the second round. Like, here's a guy, if he didn't break his foot, you're talking about a second-round draft pick. Here's a guy who he had over 2,000 yards in his college career the first 2 seasons he played.
Gary, in terms of what you're saying about the smugness, Gary, and Chris, maybe this could be potential audio for your show this coming week, is when Williams made his first appearance on the Murphy Show prior to the announcement or post the announcement of the 4-game suspension, he didn't seem overly apologetic to me. And this is not a guy who's at a loss for words. He's very well spoken. He's into broadcasting. He said that, he went to some type of seminar last year and said that might be something that he wants to do post playing career. So it's not like he couldn't get the words out, but I didn't see him be overly apologetic. And even when, Murphy kind of pressed him on the weight thing, Karlos was like, it wasn't what I was eating. It was kind of, the time that I was eating. He was kind of like brushing it under the carpet, like it's not such a big deal, and I'm going to get down there, don't you worry. And obviously he did balloon back up. But I want to get you guys' thoughts on this. So, some people have said that this was a statement made by the Bills, and anyone who would want to argue that the Bills aren't a circus could say, hey, listen, we aren't a circus because we just cut a player that had 9 touchdowns because we're not going to have that garbage in our organization. So you could say that, but do you think that the Bills were making a statement by releasing him because of all the other things that they have? Particularly, you can't cut Marcell Dareus. He's just too good. He's a 3rd overall pick. He's got way too much guaranteed, and you can't void those guarantees because his contract doesn't permit it. You can't cut someone like him. You can't make a statement with doing that. So why not cut a 5th-round running back when you got tons of other running back depth? Do you think that the Marcell Dareus suspension and other news surrounding the Bills kind of also led to this Karlos Williams release?
Well, I think that was totally a statement that, at least on the offensive side of the ball, your spot on the roster is not guaranteed, and I think that is why that they cut Karlos, and I think they can get the production elsewhere in a running back depth chart. Plus, with Marcell, the dead money cap hit is just astronomical, and we're not going to kill our cap like that by just getting rid of Marcell Dareus. He's arguably probably our best player on defense, and if you remember 2 years ago in a game, the end of the season that we needed to have for the playoffs, we lose to Oakland. Dareus goes out of that game with an injury, and all of a sudden, Oakland is running down our throats.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. And I agree with Kyle's statement. I think it is a statement, and I think that they were sending a message. If we could cut a guy who could give us 9 touchdowns, really any one spot is in jeopardy. Now, Marcell has more lenient than other players, no doubt about that. But, people got to toe the line, and Karlos Williams really, to me, showed a really lack of immaturity. Coming in out of shape, this is his job. This is what he puts food on the table. I think he's got 4 children, if I'm not mistaken, if I heard the interview correctly. You got to be responsible. And, you look at his brother, Vince Williams, he just got a contract extension today. Here's a guy you don't hear a peep out of. He's the blood brother of Karlos Williams. You think he'd be keeping his younger brother in check. It doesn't seem to be that way. So to me,
Gary, I don't know if you were. I mean, clearly, based on what I know, you really don't do a whole lot between 12 and 3 in the afternoon. So I would assume you're listening to John Murphy today when they played the clips of Rex Ryan's interview today, where he basically threw 3 of our receivers under the bus.
Real quick, pump the brakes on Chris. What are you doing that you're listening to that interview between 12 and 3? How about that? Let's get down to the basis. We know you're shopping at Wegmans. We know you got all this free time. Clearly,
I have the luxury of being able to have headphones in while I machine and program CNC machines. So
clearly,
I just stream on the TuneIn app, and then I hear you call in, somewhere between 12 and 3 to John Murphy.
You got to understand that I'm the boss at where I work. I'm a part owner. So clearly, I pay my employees to delegate work. If I get a moment, I'll listen to the show. I didn't hear it today. I didn't hear what Rex Ryan said. But since I have you who's supposedly being a machine, instead, I know you're on Match.com making profiles of yourself.
Oh, yeah.
No,
I got to get it any way I can.
I hear you, bro. Anyway, I'm not mad at you. No, but I don't know what Rex said. And that day it happened to be raining. As you know, I'm in the car wash business. So I actually had some free time, and I listened to the show, and I called in. And like I said, to me, if we're not going to get on topic and throwing this subtle jabs at each other, I think that we have good amount of talent in the running back field that Karlos will be missed, but it won't be a huge blow. And like I said, we probably wouldn't have known who Karlos Williams was had LaShawn McCoy didn't go down like he did last year. So to me, that it's almost like, hey, he wasn't the man over here to begin with, but still, great young player. I've been reading some Jets Twitter saying, "Oh, we should just cut Bohanna and put him at fullback." That just makes no sense to me.
No, the Patriots did cut Donald Brown today, but the thing I was getting at earlier today in Rex's press conference that I heard on the John Murphy show, because I have that kind of time, is he basically threw 3 of our receivers under the bus. Greg Salas for, I guess,
really?
his injury. He's usually injury prone.
Yes,
and then
and hamstrings is nothing new with Salas. That's the story of his entire career, and I would assume a big reason why he's traveled all around the NFL: St. Louis, Philadelphia, New England, the Patriots. I just said New England. The Jets, Detroit Lions, and now Buffalo. What is that? 6 teams? 7 teams? The dude's been around a while. It's not because he doesn't have ability, but he's always pulling his hamstring.
Yeah, and then he threw Des Lewis under the bus, saying basically hasn't done anything since minicamp, and then followed that up with Walter Powell, who I guess basically he said he hasn't been making plays in the preseason, which I kind of think these 3 guys are up for maybe the wide receiver 4 or 5 position, with Watkins obviously being the 1, Woods being the 2, Goodwin has taken a stranglehold on the 3, and I think the 4 spot belongs to Greg Little because he didn't throw him under the bus today. So I kind of think Rex Ryan is trying to light a fire under these guys to get that 5th wide receiver spot.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I think it is definitely strategic. Really quick to Salas, Kyle, because you hit on an interesting point. And, I spoke to a lot of Jets fans besides you. When he was in his tenure with New York, a lot of people were always excited about Salas because they always saw something. And his lack of productivity or being cut is not because of the player he is on the field. It's more so the guy is just not healthy every time. And, we saw in Week 17 he made a lot of crucial third down receptions for us that really solidified the win against the Jets. And I said to myself, who needs Chris Hogan when Salas looks like to be the same player, if not better? Seems like he's a better route runner, in my opinion, at least. But that old saying, you're not productive if you're not playing. So wouldn't be surprised me if Salas got cut. I'm surprised, though, with Walter Powell. He said those comments because, to me, I think Walter Powell has made some plays in the preseason. Obviously, he's looked better in training camp. But he also gives you something in the return game where you don't have to use Reggie Bush. So I'm surprised he made those comments. But I think they're all, like you said, I think they're all vying for that last wide receiver spot.
Well, yeah, I think you might see 2 or 3 of them make it. We don't know what the deal is with Goodwin and his injury. I don't know if you guys had read. Goodwin was injured today in the final play of training camp. Goodwin is under concussion protocol right now.
So he would be the 3rd bill that's under concussion protocol. Am I not mistaken on that?
And that's Aaron Williams, and who's the other guy?
We have one other. Oh, Gillislee, Kyle, got in the game.
That's right. Touchdown Mike. Yeah.
So let me ask you a question real quick to Chris before we let you go. Is given that Rex threw those 3 guys underneath the bus, and we still got 2 wide receivers that are on the shelf that haven't even sniffed camp in Marcus Easley and Colby Listenby. Does Rex just say, screw Desmond Lewis, screw Powell, and screw Salas? I'm just going to keep that last spot for either Listenby or Marcus Easley. Do you think that would happen?
I don't know. Powell's kind of intriguing based on the things that he can do in the return game. We really don't have anybody in the return game outside of Reggie Bush. So if Rex is going to keep somebody, I might lean to Powell because he can give you some special teams work as far as returning kicks.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what, he's a good returner too, because many Jets fans were shocked that he didn't make the final 53 last year because, in the biggest of all preseason games, Week 3 against the Giants, the battle for MetLife Stadium, he returned a punt all the way for a touchdown. I mean, this is something that, he did this repeatedly. He's a good returner, and, the Bills games that I watched this preseason, you see the flashes of him returning really well. So, honestly, if I'm a fan, I probably want to save Reggie Bush, in case Shady goes down, so I have a viable receiving option out of the backfield, and I really wouldn't want to use him on punt returns. I'd rather use Walter Powell, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with that. If I had my choice, I'd keep Powell. Desmond Lewis is intriguing, and I like Salas but to me, Salas is just a slot guy. You can't use him anywhere else. So that really, to me, it almost limits who he is. I think you could, if Robert Woods goes down, you could put Gray Little in the slot, or you could put Sammy Watkins in the slot. I don't think you need to have Salas stay on, especially how injury-prone he is. To me, we need a guy who's a designated returner, a guy who could do something in the receiving game. Powell seems to be that guy. And Kyle, like I said, I remember watching that Giants-Jets game last season, and I remember him taking that back, and he looked explosive, and he's got good vision. So it's interesting.
Yeah. All right, Chris. Thanks a bunch for calling.
Chris, I'll see you October 16th, man. Listen, I can't wait.
2 months away.
I might leave the old lady at home, so you and I might have to go on the prowl.
By the way, before Chris goes, I'm just going to say this out there. I've been saying this for a while, and I'm going to keep saying it. And sometimes it takes repetition before people get the message. I'm going to say this again for our Bills listeners out there, and even for non-Bills fans. If you're interested in what's going on with the division, you're someone like Nolan that just, you happen to hear us on another podcast, and then you decide to listen to AFC East Pros. We like spreading the wealth around here. Chris Kruger runs, in my opinion, the best Buffalo Bills podcast. AFC East Bros, we're an AFC East podcast. We're not just a Buffalo Bills podcast, but it's extremely well produced. Chris went to broadcasting school. They grab tons of audio, run tons of drops. It's funny. Drew knows his stuff in terms of schematics, X's and O's, player evaluation. It's a really fun time. The Rockpile Report, and you can follow them on Twitter at Rockpile Report, right, Chris?
Yep, we've got the last 8 episodes we've had all over 100 downloads.
Wow.
So we're almost out of being criminally underfollowed.
Yes,
we're trying to get the word out. We're trying to get the word out for you guys. We think it's awesome, and I love going back and forth with you and Drew. So, but hold on, Chris, real quick before I let you go, before I hang up on you, is Drew ready to admit defeat on the James Wilder Jr. bet?
I was going to say when he listens to this, he's probably going to be irritated in our whole running back discussion that we had. Nobody mentioned James Wilder Jr.
All right. Well,
and for good reason. He didn't show nothing.
I will allow him to wave the white flag. You relay the message to him. All right.
Oh, I'll relay it to him tomorrow night if he doesn't listen to this tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, he better. And by the way, tell Drew that I'm still waiting on something from him. He knows what. But anyway, Chris.
All right. I'll let him know.
That sounded so shady over the air, but go.
All right. Take care, Chris. All right. So, Gary, let's go back and let's talk a little bit more Dolphins before we move on and talk about some other teams.
Let's get into the Dolphins, Kyle. Something I had to ask, and really two things that kind of popped up again. We talked about Laramie Tunsil, and Kyle, I took notice because you really pointed out the first preseason game is he looks good as a pass blocker. There's some serious flaws with his run blocking, though. The reach steps and everything else, he seems like he hasn't got that quite yet. And I think there's going to be a maturation process. And I noticed that in this game against Dallas, that he looks good in pass protection, but the running game needs to come along a little bit further. Did you notice the same thing I was looking at with Tunsil?
Yeah, and again, he's swimming because he's a rookie, and I keep saying this point, and I'm going to keep beating it home, is with the current CBA, you have less and less practice time with the players. And if there's any unit on the football field that needs more time as a cohesive unit to work together in unison, to, double teaming and, who's pulling and, are they getting right off this guy's hip when they're pulling and all these things, it's offensive line. They need time together. Communication is key for them. And we're seeing more and more rookies struggle. Now, Tunsil's never played guard, so it's never been a matter of talent with him, but he's just playing something that's new for him. So to me, when I'm watching these first two games, it's not a matter of, him not being physical and just getting blown off. It seems like he's being more reactive than proactive, and he's thinking about what he's doing before he's doing it, and therefore, he's missing a guy. He's not reaching a guy as early as he should because he's thinking too much. To me, that's the biggest problem. And it's especially showing in the running game because, let's be honest, he is a better pass blocker than a run blocker. There's no mistake about it. That was the knock on him coming out is he's more of a pass protector, which you want to see that anyway. But if you're playing guard, you naturally have to be a decent run blocker. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that popped up to me, Kyle, that reared its ugly head again was the tackling. And I really seriously think that the Dolphins linebackers are terrible at tackling for some reason. I don't know what it is, Kyle. It seems like they just whiff on a lot of tackles. They don't hit the holes with fury when they see the running backs coming in. I don't know if that stood out to you.
Yeah, it seems to be a recurring theme with the Miami Dolphins. We've seen it so far this preseason, going back to last year. They're not a great tackling unit. One guy that you said, is Marcell Williams, and we're already starting to question his effort. You had gone on, you'd quoted one Dolphins fan on Twitter. One Dolphins fan said, "Hey, listen, should we cut Marcell Williams and sign Greg Hardy?" I mean, really? Come on, already. But again, though, go ahead.
They're throwing in the towel already on Marcell Williams. It's unbelievable.
But it is kind of believable, actually, though, because if you're a Dolphins fan, think about it. You're getting this guy who's supposed to be an all-world talent, but he's on the back end of his career, and he basically – it's comparable to Albert Hainsworth. If you think about big-time defensive linemen that just basically quit on their teams in recent years, you think of Albert Hainsworth, number one, and Marcell Williams, number two. Both guys had over a $100 million contract, and for whatever reason, that couldn't motivate them enough to want to play. And you see him rush in to try to make a tackle, and he just kind of, he's got these big old arms. They're extremely long, and they're extremely jacked, and he just kind of does a little weak dive, and he just kind of throws his arm at the running back, Alfred Morris, expecting him to go down. And Alfred Morris doesn't. He just keeps turning his legs, and he runs for a first down, and Marcell Williams is standing dumbfounded afterwards. But we're seeing a lack of effort already in Miami. This is before losses start to pile up. You start 0-2, very realistic possibility for Miami, being that they're going to Seattle and then going to New England. Is this guy going to quit on his team already?
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I reposted that tweet about the Greg Hardy thing. And I said, I guess Dolphins fans are done with are giving up already on the Marcell Williams experiment. And then I said, ... experience. Because this is what Bills fans had to deal with. Was basically a prima donna who only wanted to rush the quarterback, who, seriously, Kyle, that I watched that game. He was going against Doug Free, who's not a bad right tackle. He's not the best. Guy had him stonewalled, and really, he does this. He does that little hop move sometimes that Paul Kruger does, Kyle, that you and I were kind of making fun of that he used to do in Baltimore. He does that move, but usually you're a speed guy. You do that move. If you're a big guy, Marcell Williams doesn't bull rush anymore. He really, it's puzzling. And good luck to Dolphins fans. I want to see when, shit hits the fan, how Marcell Williams is going to react.
Another question, one that I've been questioning Miami repeatedly. Why play Dallas Thomas over Laramie Tunsil? Why play Tunsil at guard instead of tackle? And another thing is, I think their plan is to play Marcell Williams at left defensive end rather than play him at right defensive end. So he wants to play left so he can rush against the right tackle. He's typically done that throughout his entire career. But in my mind, Cameron Wake has been the more effective pass rusher in recent years, and that's what Cameron Wake has done since his inception in Miami back in 2009, I think it was. So why are you going to take a guy, Cameron Wake, who's been with the Dolphins for so long, and that's what he does? He's primarily a pass rusher. That's all Cameron Wake does, and he's so good at it. I get it. He's coming off an Achilles tear, and all of a sudden you're going to move him to the other side to put Marcell Williams where he's comfortable. And part of me is wondering, is this because this is going to appease Marcell Williams? This is going to keep him happy? Why else would you do it?
Yeah, very interesting point, Kyle. And I think that, you might be onto something. Marcell Williams, his voice was heard loud in Buffalo. I mean, let's face it, he was making tabloids last year. He was saying how displeased he was at dropping back in coverage. And this is nothing new. In a Rex Ryan scheme, Kyle, we've seen Calvin Pace, we've seen Brian Thomas, we've seen Jared Johnson, Terrell Suggs, Jerry Hughes. I mean, the list goes on. If you play that outside linebacker edge guys, you drop back in coverage on occasion. And Marcell Williams is just not a team player, Kyle. He's a me guy. This is what he wants to do. Let's face it, Kyle. I mean, Rex Ryan, throughout his whole career, has had pretty much a proven track record. Now, there's been certain years where he had lack of talent. There's certain years he had great talent. But either way, he's always had tough defenses, and he's always had a defense that was proven. Marcell Williams was definitely cancerous to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, no one's disputing that. It seemed like every other week he was complaining, and I think that the Dolphins heard about that and seen it, and especially a young coach like Adam Gase, Kyle, who's even probably close to age in Marcell Williams, let's face it. He probably doesn't run or ruffles, this 6'6", 300-pound monster's feathers, and let's just keep him happy. We'll move Cameron Wake over there. Cameron Wake does not look as explosive as he once was, even though at camp I've been hearing a lot of reports that he has been looking explosive. But in the preseason, I didn't see it. But I completely think you're totally right that they're trying to keep Marcell Williams happy and his mouth shut. If they just do what Marcell Williams says, he won't cause a stir over here.
I mean, that just seems like a really desperate, bad move from a desperate franchise.
It really does.
You're going to bring a guy in who was a big whiny baby last year, and let's not rock the boat with him. Let's keep him happy. I mean, come on, he's not the same talent that he used to be. No doubt he can still do certain nice things if he is doing what he wants to do, but I don't think you alter your defensive scheme and what has worked for you for years to appease him.
I agree. And like I said, I think it's a terrible move, and you're probably 100% right on their train of thought that let's keep him happy.
What about Kenny Stills? You're an Oklahoma guy. He was certainly a disappointment in Miami last year. Maybe it was because he was misused, but I don't know how many non-Dolphins fans know this out there, but when Adam Gase was the offensive coordinator last year for the Chicago Bears, he actually went to the front office and tried to, basically get them to trade for Kenny Stills. He was that high on him. And lo and behold, he becomes the Miami Dolphins head coach, and now Kenny Stills has fallen into his lap. And here's one thing you could say about Kenny Stills, is he's a very limited player. You could maybe compare him to Devin Smith in certain ways. He's undersized, but he's got good, deep, down-the-field speed. But he only runs a certain amount of routes. But those certain routes that he does run, he's pretty effective at them. But he never quite seemed comfortable in the Miami scheme. A little bit more towards the end of the season than the beginning of the season, but he certainly was not very effective last year. But he's been tearing it up from all accounts in the offseason, and we finally saw it in some live game action in the second preseason game. He looked pretty good down in Dallas.
Absolutely, Kyle. And I was actually really upset last year when the Dolphins made the trade to get him, because I remember in 2013 when the Bills played the Saints, he was taking us deep and beating us all the time. And seemingly like he was a one-trick pony, but I remember his stint in Oklahoma. He ran an incredible route tree. And I think that he's going to be a more effective receiver this year for the Dolphins, possibly even more than Parker or Landry, just given by the chemistry him and Tannehill have built this offseason. I might be saying a bold statement, but I think, Kenny Stills is a good wide receiver. He's a good route runner. He's got 4.38 speed, so he can get down the field. And for the most part, he has pretty reliable hands, and it showed in that Dallas game, Kyle. To me, it was nothing new. and I was actually shocked when New Orleans traded him. I think that they had a similar player in Brandon Cooks, so they just didn't want to have that same type of player. But it just seemed like to me that the kid was misused last year. I think that we can all agree on that, just given by what we saw in this Dallas game.
You know what's weird about New Orleans is it seems like they and their coaching staff have it in for some players. Like, many people were shocked that Keenan Lewis, the cornerback, was recently released. And apparently him and Dennis Allen, the former Raiders head coach, had some type of disagreement, and they never got along. And there was reports last year that Kenny Stills and Sean Payton never quite saw eye to eye. So there's something weird going on in New Orleans. Obviously, Rob Ryan was displeased with the way that things ended there when he left them. So I don't know if it's something weird going on between players and coaches or what have you. But that's also another reason. Listen, you can't doubt Kenny Stills' talent, but it was weird that he did depart for a fifth-round pick, being that he was on such a cheap salary. But anyway, let's move on. We really haven't talked any Jets yet, but before we talk any Jets, I want to talk about stadiums. So not only do we have one new stadium name, but we have two in the AFC East. Let's start off with the Dolphins, and their stadium is now Hard Rock Stadium. If any of you have ever seen the Hard Rock Cafe, well, they got the stadium name, and it's been going on for a couple months. There was two suitors to get the naming rights for the Miami Dolphins stadium. It was between Hard Rock and it was between Qatar Airways. And I don't know all the specifics, but from what I do know is it was more of a political reasons that led to the demise of Qatar Airways. They might have been a potential higher bidder, but some Dolphins season ticket holders and some other higher-ups said, hey, listen, if you give Qatar Airways the naming rights to the stadium, we're going to give up our season tickets and we're going to lose our relationship that we've had with you. And apparently it goes down to some type of political issues, to which I don't have the exact knowledge of. So anyway, they ended up going with...
Real quick, what is this airline based out of?
I'm assuming Qatar, the country Qatar, the little small country, very oil-rich in the Middle East. But that's purely based off their name. I don't really know too much.
But is that where they're based, or is that just where they were?
They might be. It might be United Arab Emirates as well, UAE, but I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. Toyota is a Japanese company, but they got plants all around the United States, so I just didn't know what was their reasoning for that. If they had places in the United States, I would assume that it would be a little bit easier and they're employing Americans. But either way, I like to me, Hard Rock Stadium flows up the tongue a lot nicer. To me, but the Dolphins Stadium, Kyle, has been a revolving door of names. I mean,
Sun Life Stadium, Landshark Stadium.
Yeah, it's like, geez, just pick one and keep it for more than 2 years.
Yeah. Going back to asking where they're based, if they are based out of Qatar, when Qatar got the World Cup a couple years ago, there was a whole big firestorm about that. People were up in arms. Oh, how could you give it to them? Qatar, really? Who goes there? Who knows about it? But not only that, but, whenever a country goes through this whole process of making the stadium so that they can host a World Cup, you always see these issues with the labor that you're bringing in. And I saw, a brief piece of the documentary that said that, Qatar's basically employing people from like India and from other impoverished countries. They're getting them to come in. They get them to sign these contracts to which basically, they're paying them almost no money, and they can basically not get out of the contract. They can't leave, and they put them in the worst of conditions. So maybe it has something to do with that. But again, I'm just kind of speculating without really doing any specific research.
Yeah. Well, either way, I still think Hard Rock sounds nicer.
It's definitely cooler for sure.
Absolutely.
The other one is New Era Stadium, and I actually kind of saw
New Era
new
Field,
spin.
Kyle.
New Era Field. I stand corrected. Thank you for that. New Era Field used to be Ralph Wilson Stadium, named after the former Bills owner. They erected a statue in his honor to kind of still say, hey, listen, you had your part in this. But New Era Field, and this is one thing that the Murphy Show had said, and I didn't think about it like this prior to that, is New Era, it kind of's got a feel to it. Like, now you have a new era being that Terry Pegula is the owner. No longer are the days of the Bills being the cheap spenders that won't go out and spend for their franchise. Now you got an owner who's willing to spend the big bucks to make a new stadium, who's willing to spend all the cap money if need be, who's willing to spend the money to bring a big-time coach in, because there is, by the way, there is no salary cap on what you can pay a coach. So, you know, people were saying Terry Pegula, you know, he's going to keep the Bills in Buffalo, but it's a new era. Also, is New Era the, you know, fitted hat company? I believe they also make jerseys, particularly throwback jerseys. I believe that they have their roots.
Strictly a cap company, Kyle.
Strictly a cap, but didn't they used to make jerseys?
You're talking about Mitchell and Ness, I think.
Mitchell and Ness, there you go. But anyway,
yeah.
New Era, they are based out of Buffalo. They have their roots in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a win-win for the region. Not only that, it's a 7-year term, which is the life of the Ralph Wilson lease. And they also got first right of refusal, Kyle, if a new stadium is made, that they get the first right of refusal to buy the naming rights. So, to me, it symbolizes a lot. Besides, you just touched on the New Era. It's definitely not your dad's cheap Bills. Kyle, when I was coming to high school, the Bills were not. We were excited when we signed names like DeJuan Edwards and Andre Davis. You know, now the Bills are they're spending $90 million on a quarterback that played 8 games for them, or won 8 games for them. So it's definitely a different feel, and I think a lot of people will attest to that. And also, Kyle, this is something that should be happening. Naming rights are supposed to alleviate from the fans, you know. It's supposed to drive ticket prices down, concession prices down. Having that steady revenue come in is supposed to help. And for years, Bills fans wanted this. They wanted Ralph Wilson Stadium. And people are saying, well, how can you – some people are saying that. It's very few. How can you change the name of – Ralph Wilson was our legendary owner. Well, most fans pre-existing Ralph Wilson Stadium remember it as Rich Stadium, Kyle.
Yep.
And so, to me, there is no nostalgia. I think that the stadium, you haven't been there recently, Kyle, but they have a huge statue of Ralph Wilson with his hand out, and you could go up and shake his hand. It's pretty symbolic, and they got several other things around the stadium that commemorate Ralph Wilson. So I don't think that he's getting tarnished in any way, and no one's really sad about it. So I think that we're actually happy. I think New Era does a great job with the Buffalo Bills. And really, Kyle, you got to come to the stadium with me this year and see it, because it's an old stadium, but it really has some cool enhancements to it.
I would certainly like to, that's for sure. And, Gary, just think about it like this, too. I mean, isn't it kind of tacky to have your stadium named after your owner? I mean, like, listen, everyone knows who's the owner of the team. Do you really have to have, like, a stadium named after you? I mean, it just seems like a little weird to me. And I don't know any other teams that do that. Can you think of another one in the NFL?
Paul Brown Stadium. Paul Brown Stadium Cup.
Who else?
For the Bengals.
Who else?
mean, you look at Lambeau Field and Soldier Field, they don't have any names to their sponsors either, but they're kind of symbolic because they've been around for so long, those two fields. Arrowhead Stadium's another one that comes to mind. But either way, to have the owner's name on it is kind of, like you said, it's kind of pompous in a way. We know this is your team. We know that you have roots in this team. I kind of like having the sponsors. Now, Kyle, what another thing is come into question is we see it on the practice jerseys that they usually get a sponsor patch on the side. There's been lately talks that might surface over into game situations where you have a sponsor patch on the side of the jersey. That's something I wouldn't be a fan of. I think I like the jersey as is.
Yeah, that's the soccer model, if anyone's familiar with particularly
right.
European soccer, and even, soccer over here. I mean, shoot, everyone knows. I used to play FIFA, particularly like 2 summers ago, and I always remember you wanted to buy this specific jersey of, what's it, the Seattle, I forget whatever their name is, but Xbox is their sponsor. And it was always so expensive to buy the Xbox jerseys, but it was cool because you got Xbox logo on your jersey. But, I know that a lot of fans would really be upset by that. They don't want to turn it into this, the players into walking advertisements, walking billboards, if you will. And one other note about New Era Field is also, I guess it doesn't hurt when your starting quarterback has also just inked a big-time deal with New Era, and I believe that Tyrod Taylor has a deal with them, and he's helping them design caps and whatnot.
Yeah, not only that, Kyle. Besides Tyrod Taylor, it's sports apparel. Like Hard Rock Cafe has nothing to do with the Dolphins. Besides, they probably have a restaurant in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
But New Era makes the baseball caps for every NFL team. They're embedded with the NFL, so it's really symbolic in more than one ways. Besides being a Western New York company, and besides having a cool name and a name that kind of what the Bills are trying to go towards is a New Era, is that they have a company that works directly with the NFL that's sponsoring their stadium.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the phones, and we got another caller on the line, and he is someone that is near and dear to our hearts, Gary. This is none other than Mr. Tibbs himself, Mr. Gary Smith Sr. How's it going, Dad?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
What's up, Dad?
I just want to give my condolences to the Mr. Buffalo Bill fan here for Karlos Williams.
I could tell you right now.
The guy was always a bad apple, and he proved his point. And I don't think for a while, unless somebody gets hurt on another team, I don't think anybody's going to pick him up.
Well, apparently he's visiting the Jets as we speak.
Yeah, and apparently.
Are you serious? Oh,
well,
no.
That doesn't surprise me. That's definitely a Jets move.
Oh, please. IKN and Polly named captain for a game. Don't even go there.
Here we go. We'll say that for a rainy day, Kyle. But either way, listen, we don't have to talk about picking up Aaron Maven, too.
Okay, well, Walter Powell. Come on, the list goes on. It goes back and forth.
Ellis Langster. All right, anyway.
Well, one thing I can say, the Kansas City Chiefs don't pick up any gangsters on their team.
You guys had a guy who committed murder in the parking lot and then committed suicide.
Oh, we were just talking about that, the Javon Belcher thing, Kyle, the other day, me and a buddy of mine. What a weird scenario. And you know what the crazy thing is? Romeo Cornell and Scott Pioli were on the parking lot when that whole thing went down, which had to be really upsetting. I mean,
that is, you could probably never get that image out of your head.
Never out of your head.
No.
And but Dad, real quick with Karlos Williams is that, and we just had a resident Bills fan who actually has a podcast, and Kyle, I was trying to explain to him that yes, we love the productivity of Karlos Williams, but a lot of Bills fans, and even I included, feel like that in that offense and all the depth we had, that Karlos Williams will be missed, but not as missed as you think he will be, because the Bills have done such a good job of building good depth. And really, their run scheme is kind of like what the Denver Broncos had. I think Chris made a good point, Kyle, is that guys whose careers were dead in the water, like Mike Gillislee, found success in this offense. And now you got a guy like Reggie Bush, who looks really good in camp and really explosive. In fact, Kyle, I know we're not going to want to hear this, but I was reading little notes from practice. They were running the Wildcat today, Bush and McCoy. So
I'm not surprised. I mean, Rex loves the Wildcat.
Yeah, so either way, I think he will be missed, but not as missed as a lot of outsiders think. I think you talk to general Bills fans, and you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, they kind of got sick of Karlos Williams. First of all, bad. It started with the weight gain. I mean, showing up to minicamp at 261 pounds, and then kind of brushing it off and making this kind of BS excuse. We gave him a pass. Now, keep in mind, he was on a short lease when he came to the Bills. He had a domestic violence dispute in college. He was a fifth-round pick, so it wasn't a lot of heavily invested in him. And he gets popped his rookie year for smoking marijuana. Now, there's just a fine, and you're put in the program. So he's put in the program. Then, after minicamp's over, we find out that he gets popped for a second time, 4-game suspension. So obviously, he clearly has a problem. So he's having a hard time being on schedule as far as a player is supposed to do. So then, Dad, he gets activated. He passes a physical, and he doesn't look good when he's running the ball. So clearly, the time where he was supposed to get back in shape, he's having a hard time dealing with the offense. He's running into the backup players. He's not looking well. So then he comes back to the Bills and reports, but he's put back some weight on. So clearly Karlos Williams is not taking his job seriously. I think he got too big for his own britches. And I think that the Bills wanted, like Kyle said earlier, they had to make a statement that even though you were productive, you're deemed expendable. And I'm sad to see him go, but I don't think he's going to be quite missed like a lot of outsiders think. Keep in mind, Karlos Williams got a lot of his playing time when McCoy was hurt. So
I got a question for Kyle.
Okay, yeah. I hope it's Jets related because we really haven't talked about the Jets yet, and we got to do that. So
we got to talk about.
I watched the replay of the Redskin-Jet preseason game, and I thought Bryce Petty looked pretty good, even though he was playing against a lot of the second-string Redskin defense. Do you think he has a chance to move up on the depth chart after that showing?
Well, before I answer that question, you said that you think that he looked good. I want you to tell me specific reasons why you think he looked good.
Well, he completed a lot of passes. I think he looked better than Geno Smith.
He did.
And he looked kind of poised. It's the most playing time I ever saw him get on the field. So I thought he looked pretty, under the circumstances, I thought he looked pretty good.
You know, I mean, when you look at the final stat line, you say, wow, Bryce Petty had a pretty good performance. But if you dig deeper and if you watch the game closely, it wasn't all that impressive. Here's one big reason. He threw one really bad pass where he stared down a receiver, and not only did it jump right off of one Redskins defender's hands, but then another Redskins defender had a chance to intercept that same ball, and it bounced off of his hand as well. So that could have been an intercepted pass. You know, you think about he had a really big down-the-field throw to Robbie Anderson, which could have went for an 80-yard touchdown because Robbie Anderson's a really fast dude. He's like low 4'4", high 4'3" guy. He's a 6'3", 190-pound lanky dude that's got good downfield speed. He beat his cornerback clean. Bryce Petty throws him the ball, but Robbie Anderson, because the ball is underthrown, has to stop running at full speed. He catches it. It's a 50-yard completion. That looks great. Bryce Petty threw a 50-yard pass. Well, it should have been an 80-yard touchdown if he threw the ball the way it was supposed to be thrown. He had a couple other really bad plays in there as well, you know, throwing balls into the dirt. So it was definitely an improvement.
They did drop a couple passes on him, too.
Yes, Jalen Marshall, who, by the way, Jets fans, I told you so. God. He's not as good as what you're saying. I get it. The kid's nice. He works hard. He used to be a quarterback. He's got some intangibles. I get that. He's not as athletically gifted as you might think he is. He's slow. He's undersized, and he's dropped 3 or 4 balls in 2 preseason games where he's not even playing major reps. Not only that, but in the 2 practices I went to, I saw him drop about 3 or 4 punts. So this guy, what's his niche on the team supposed to be? Punt returning or what? The guy can't hang on to the ball. I don't think Jalen Marshall makes the roster. So, yes, Dad, you are right. People did drop balls for him, particularly Jalen Marshall. Sharon Peake dropped the ball, too, that he probably should have caught. You know, he tried to one-hand Jarvis Landry the ball, and he probably should have just got 2 hands on it. But it was definitely an improvement from Bryce Petty. There's no doubt about that. He did not look good against the Giants, not the Giants, the Jaguars. But, you know, his offensive line was not blocking well for him. He looked horrible last preseason. And the practices I went to, he looked pretty bad as well. So this is an improvement. And when you contrast that to how bad Geno was, when Geno just stared down double coverage and threw that horrible interception that could have went for a pick 6, if you ask me, you know, you kind of think, you know what? You know, maybe Bryce Petty can be QB2. And maybe the Jets, because here's the thing. Gary, you know how bad was Matt Castle last year in camp?
Oh, it was terrible.
Okay? He was terrible, but yet the Bills still swung a 5th-round draft pick to him. Teams get desperate for quarterbacks, and quarterback is such a valued position that you can, you know, get a decent draft pick for them. And listen, I know there's a lot of people out there that hate Geno Smith and just think he's terrible, but you could maybe swing a 6th or a 5th-round pick for him because, you know, he's a player that he certainly has more upside than a Matt Castle, certainly has a better arm than him. If Castle can go for a 5th, can Geno go for a 6th or 7th? And maybe the Jets, because this current regime didn't draft him, maybe because he's only got 1 year left on his deal, they would be willing to trade him rather than cut him. And it's just food for thought. But Bryce Petty, I didn't think he was that great, though.
Can I ask you? Go ahead, Dad.
I'm sorry. The only thing, though, I hear and I read in the New York Post that the Jets' rookie quarterback can't hit his targets in practice.
Oh, I've been hearing a lot of that lately too, Kyle. That he was 2 for something in 11-on-11 work. I mean, when are we going to see Hackenberg? That's the big question boiling on everyone's mind, and especially Jets fans' minds. When do we get to see Christian Hackenberg out on the field with some live play? Why are they hiding him?
Well,
is he the next Peyton Manning, or is he the next Brian Brom?
He's certainly not the next Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning started from out the gate, and Peyton Manning had his struggles early on. People forget that whole Jim Mora playoffs rant, he was throwing Peyton Manning under the bus. Jim Mora, he was the defensive mind for the Colts. He was saying that loss is not on the defense. He's like, you ain't going to beat anybody when you turn the ball over like that and you throw 4 interceptions. Like, he was blaming Peyton Manning in his rookie year. So Peyton Manning struggled as a rookie, but he at least played. You're not going to see that with Hackenberg. That wasn't the plan when the Jets drafted him, but it is concerning. Like, see, in my mind, I knew the Jets, when they drafted him, they had no intentions of playing him this year. But I also thought that I never would have thought that the Jets had any intentions that they weren't going to play him in the preseason or wait till preseason game 4 to play him. It just doesn't make any sense. You want to get some reps under this kid. I get it. You want to give your top 3 guys, some reps, and you want to see if Bryce Petty is worth keeping on the roster. I get all that. But to give Bryce Petty 8 drives, and not give Christian Hackenberg 2, doesn't make much sense to me. But you're right, Dad. I mean, the dude is horribly inaccurate, and that is the biggest reason, inaccuracy, why I think Christian Hackenberg will amount to nothing in the NFL. And I did a whole podcast episode on him.
Who do you think is the odd man out with the Jets? They got 4 quarterbacks in camp. Obviously, they're not going to start the season with 4 quarterbacks. Who do you think is the odd man out?
Well, I think that we're also going to have to see what happens over these next 2 preseason games before we can know that with a certainty. But I will say that I know that for sure Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to be on the final 53, and I know that Christian Hackenberg will be on this roster as well. Now, the question is, will the Jets give Christian Hackenberg some of the Foxborough flu? And if you don't know what that is basically come up with some type of fake injury where they can put him on IR and basically stash him on the roster and still keep the other 3 quarterbacks. That might happen. I mean, listen, Manish Mehta, I really don't like his work for the most part, but I thought he wrote an interesting article which has some validity to it. And one thing is for certain is teams do this all the time, and it's happening more and more, is they come up with phony type of injuries for players so that they could stash them on the injured reserve. And in that story that Manish wrote, he said that, the Eagles did this with one of their quarterbacks. It was Coy Detmer, I believe, and his brother was also on the roster at the same exact time. And he went into the training room, and apparently his brother was faking that he had a knee injury, and he had like a towel over his face, but then his brother winked to him. And the one brother said, I had to leave the training room because I was going to laugh so hard. I knew the injury was fake. So anyway, teams do this. So you remember that.
Yeah.
Now, people are saying that maybe the Jets will do that with Hackenberg. And listen, the guy was sacked 82 times over his last 2 seasons in college football, so maybe it's not all that unfathomable to say that he's got some type of reoccurring injury. I mean, that's shady business to me, and personally, I think that the NFL should do a better job of investigating. Listen, they want to hire Ted Wells and spend millions of dollars to do an investigation about deflated balls. Well, why don't you see if teams are not, complying with the rules, and if they're making up phony baloney injury reports, just so they could stash guys on their roster. I mean, to me, that's a bigger issue, and the NFL needs to do a better job of looking into these things. So anyway, that's at least a possibility for Christian Hackenberg. And I would say that the Jets also might trade Geno Smith, being that last year of his contract, maybe Bryce Petty is performing at a comparable level to him. But after last week's performance, it's hard to see Bryce Petty getting cut.
Yeah, I agree.
I will say this, Kyle, that we had several discussions. We had Faye and Ben on, and they were saying, and I made the point. I've been saying this. I've been pounding my desk on this. I don't believe Geno Smith is starting caliber quarterback. And I have several Jets fans tweet me back and say, we agree. We don't think he is either. I'm gonna pose the question, Kyle, because you said this a couple weeks ago, and I asked what quarterbacks would you take him over, and two names you mentioned were Blaine Gabbert and RG3. Does that still hold true today?
Can you repeat the question, Gary? You said Blaine Gabbert and RG3.
Yeah, or the two guys that you mentioned that you would take them over out of the 32 teams.
I don't think I said RG3. I think someone else might have said that. I don't think I said that. Blaine Gabbert, I definitely did say that with him.
Yeah, well, either way, I do believe you did say, but we'll have to go back and check. And his name was definitely brought up in that conversation. So,
no, I definitely didn't say
RG3's having a good camp in Cleveland.
Well, he should. He has all his Baylor buddies over there that they can help him out. Either way, I do believe that Geno had a rough outing, and I think this is the Geno that rears his head most of the time. He'll have a good game, but this is mostly the Geno Smith that we've been seeing throughout his career. And Kyle, it might come to a point where, like I've been saying to a lot of Jets fans, that this is not their guy. And Kyle, I think you bring up a great point that he might offer something in the trading department. Maybe they're trying to showcase him off, or maybe they're trying to get Petty all these reps because they might think that Petty is the guy. And keep in mind, this GM drafted Petty, so he has kind of a tie to him.
He's got much more of an allegiance to Bryce Petty. Not only did he spend a 4th rounder on him, but he also tossed a 7th rounder so that he could trade up one spot to nab Bryce Petty. So he's not going to be so quick to want to part ways with him, and I think that's a big reason why you've seen so much Petty this preseason. Hey, listen, Todd, we all know preseason games don't matter in terms of wins and losses. Get this guy on the field. We need to evaluate him. So all that tells me that we're going to see Bryce Petty. We're going to see Fitzpatrick. We're definitely going to see Hackenberg on this roster. Will the Jets keep Geno Smith? Will they keep 4 quarterbacks? Or will they find a way to trade Geno? Or will they outright cut him? That seems to be the biggest thing right now. I just can't imagine Petty. I mean, listen, if Petty went out there and he bombed and just played absolutely horrible, I would say maybe he could have had a chance to get cut. But after what we saw, which was, I would say, mediocre, he's probably going to stick.
Let's get into a few more notes, Kyle, about this game, because we still got to wrap up the Patriots. We haven't gotten to the Bills preseason game yet. Couple things that stuck out to me, and you could just comment on them, and we'll wrap this up real quick. Dad, I don't know if you saw this, that once again the Jets' run defense was really shaky. Big holes opening up, several 7-yard gains, 8-yard gains. It's just really uncharacteristic. I know Mo Wilkerson's not there, but like I said, and I know it's the preseason, and trust me, I don't put much stock in the preseason. I've been always the one to say, hey, the Detroit Lions went 4-0 in the preseason, and they didn't win a single game after that. So, but Kyle, it has to be a little concerning how sloppy the Jets are, especially this being a veteran team and a team that had 10 wins last year. You'd think they'd be a little bit more crisp with most of their pieces coming back.
It is concerning, and the types of runs that the Jets are getting beat on this preseason versus the types of runs that they got beat on last regular season are different types of runs. You think back to games where the Jets got gashed in the running department. You think of the Buffalo game, the Thursday night game. You think of the Week 17 Buffalo game, and you think of that Eagles game, Week 3. And the Eagles were running a lot of, kind of jet and speed sweep type of plays, where they were running straight to the outside, and they were gashing the Jets on those plays. Shady McCoy in that Thursday night games, he was running a lot of off-tackle plays, or he was cutting it back, but not necessarily. He had his inside runs, don't get me wrong, but a lot of those runs were to the outside. And what is a big reason why teams would run on the outside to the Jets versus the inside? Well, you had big Damon Snacks Harrison clogging the middle. You don't have him anymore. So now teams are running up the middle on the Jets. And the alarming thing is we're seeing linebackers miss tackles. David Harris is a sure tackler, but you see the positives and the negatives of Darren Lee in that last game. One play, the Redskins run an outside toss type of run. Darren Lee chases the running back down all the way to the sideline and basically forces him out of bounds. That's great. But then the very next play, he follows it up with a missed tackle. And that's what you're going to get. So, yes, the Jets, it might be a little bit harder because of the speed that they have now to run on the outside versus them, but I think it's going to be easier to run up the middle because you just basically lost the best run stuffer in the entire league.
Yeah, Dad, what did you think of that game as far as their run defense and their defense overall?
I agree everything what Kyle said. He's absolutely right.
Yeah,
and
Kyle,
and losing Snacks to the Giants definitely hurts the Jets.
It hurts them, but you can't argue with the fact that they let him go. You cannot. I mean, listen, he's valuable for what he does, but paying $9 million for a guy that plays about 50% of the snaps,
right,
gives you no pass rush. You just can't do it in today's NFL. And exactly. I think that was a move by a desperate franchise, by a desperate GM trying to save his job, which is that is exactly what Jerry Reese is right now.
Right.
Yeah, Kyle, no doubt about it. I actually commend Mike McCann for not overextending his hand on Snacks Harrison, because you can't, especially with the other D linemen that you do have along that line that offer you way more. I mean, Williams, Wilkerson, and Sheldon Richardson, those are 3 down linemen, So they play all 3 downs. Where Snacks Harrison is just a two guy, and you can't put all that money into him. Another thing I have to point out, I know you already alluded, is the missed tackles, but more so from once again Marcus Williams, Kyle. I don't know what it is with the kid. I don't know if he shies away from contact. I don't know if it's technique. I don't know what it is, but he's a huge liability, especially when teams bounce the ball to the outside and he's one-on-one and he has to make that tackle. We saw this all last season, and it's continuing into this season.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is Marcus Williams was a part-time player last year, and now that being that you don't have Antonio Cromartie manning the opposite corner of Darrelle Revis, some people are saying it's going to be Marcus Williams who's going to be that guy. Well, if he's going to be that guy, he's playing 80-90% of the snaps this season, which means that he's going to be much more susceptible to having to make tackles. And the fact of the matter is he's not good at that at all. And the Jets kind of laughably played him at safety last year out in Oakland, and he just continuously whiffed. He probably missed on about 70% of his tackle attempts out in that game. It was really horrible.
Yeah. Now let's get into some of the good things I did see. One thing I could say that the Jets have a lot of young, talented wide receivers. We saw this kid, Kyle, this Ross kid, really light it up. We've seen Jalen Marshall light it up. There's a lot of young, talented wide receivers in that Jets organization that are making a lot of plays. And no short of plays were made in this game, Kyle. So I really liked the youngsters that are stepping up when they're on the field. I know you're not the biggest Jalen Marshall fan, but no one's denying he had a great first week in the preseason. And there's a name that you really like that came along this preseason that kind of brought a lot of question marks to the Jets. How many wide receivers are the Jets going to keep? Who are some of the names that you think are they're sticking out to you?
Yeah, so I think it's decently realistic that the Jets could keep 7 wide receivers, and I say that because it's just such a talented position. But the problem is you want to try to keep 7 receivers. Well, how are you going to do that and keep 4 quarterbacks as well? Just because keeping 4 quarterbacks in the NFL is just unprecedented nowadays. No one does it. But I think the Jets would like to keep 7 wide receivers. And, if I'm talking about the young guys, the under-the-radar guys, the people that people don't know about very well, I like Robbie Anderson, the undrafted free agent out of Temple University, which, by the way, is Todd Bowles' alma mater and Muhammad Wilkerson's alma mater. Listen, the kid's got wheels, but not only that, but he's a hands catcher, Gary. That's so important in the NFL. And when he beat that corner late in the game for that deep touchdown, he went up vertically, caught the ball straight with his hands, and just kept running afterwards. He made it look easy for that touchdown. And I also like the kid out of Clemson, Sharon Peake. And listen, there's no doubt about it. In recent years, Clemson has been producing wide receivers like nobody's business. When you think of Sammy Watkins, when you think of Hopkins, when you think of Martavis Bryant, big-time receivers have come out of Clemson. And this kid, some people are saying second, third-round talent, but he slid because of his knee. I've seen enough to him in these preseason games that I would want to keep him versus Jalen Marshall or, a Jeremy Ross. And I get it. Jeremy Ross or Jalen Marshall, one of those guys is supposed to be your returner. But, part of me also wonders if you can't throw someone else out there at returner.
Yeah. And one thing that it brings up an interesting point, we got to get to the Bills game after this, is that I talked to Viet, who's our Jets fan, is that the Jets love having a lot of wide receivers out in the field. They like doing 4, 3 wide receiver sets. And to me, the reason why they can keep so many wide receivers, if they choose to, is because I think the tight end position might be, I'm not going to say completely taken out, but phased almost out of this offense.
Yes.
I mean, you have Kellen Davis, Kyle, who's strictly a blocking tight end. I mean, we saw that awesome play that he just fumbled the ball. And then you got Jason Morrow, Kyle, who can't block, and his hands are questionable. His hands are really questionable, and he's not part of this regime. He's not part of Mike McCannon's drafts. And then who's looked the most impressive in preseason is Sudfeld.
But but just like Davis, though, he also had a very questionable fumble.
I get that. But all I'm saying to you is that he's probably a good balance between the two. It seems like he can block a little better than Amaro and definitely catch a little better than Kellen Davis.
But he's still really bad at both things.
I get it. The Jets, and I said this on Twitter, I think the Jets have the worst tight end situation in the NFL. I think there's no question about that.
Yeah, I can't think of one that's worse. Yes.
Yeah. I got to go. Thanks for having me on. I got one quick question for Gary.
What's up, Dad?
Does McCoy get 1,000 yards this year?
I think so. I think if he could stay healthy, I think he's a 1,400-yard rusher.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Love you, Dad. Take care.
Love you, Dad.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, by the way, real quick, before we get off the Jets, we've got to get into the Bills. In fact, we should just get into the Bills after I say this, is that it makes a lot of sense for the Jets to kind of devalue that tight end position just because of where they're at. There's no good guys on the market, and the guys they have right now are just not cutting the mustard.
Yeah, let's not talk about the Jets anymore. Let's give some love to the Bills, and then let's, if we can, a little bit also touch on the Patriots too.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have to wrap that up. All right, Kyle, your thoughts on the Bills game, because you are not the Bills fan.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, you think about the guy who just signed a big old contract. Sometimes guys pack it in after they get all that money. Not the case with Tyrod Taylor. Looked extremely impressive. He has the one play where he kind of schoolyards it. He does a pirouette, spin move, and then he makes an amazing throw downfield. You also see that one in the red zone where he's chopping, setting his feet in the pocket. Great pass protection from the offensive line. Sets his feet, then rifles one into LaShawn McCoy, who is a very good receiving back for a touchdown. I think Tyrod looked excellent in the game. I think Bills fans have to be really happy with the contract that you signed for him. McCoy certainly looked good. You saw that burst that you've always seen with him. Looks like he's healthy again, so he stood off to me. I think Kevon Seymour looked good again. He's another guy that popped off. I think the linebackers, Preston Brown and Zach Brown, both of them, I think were respectable. Let's see, any other names that are popping off to me. I think Jonathan Williams was okay. I mean, listen, I didn't see anything tremendously impressive from him, but also give credit to the offensive line. I can't say that enough. We said that the Bills' offensive line was the best in the division, and they certainly showed it in this game.
Yeah, keep in mind, Kyle, that they're missing Incognito and Glenn. They're dealing with Cyrus Kwanjo, who, look, Kyle, I gave him one of my top stars. I thought that, and people are pointing this out. Steve Tasker pointed this out, that he has a bad right knee. So the Bills have been trying to plug him at right tackle for the last, couple of years. So when you do that kickback block, you push off your right knee to kick back. And it's putting a lot of pressure, and he just doesn't have the bend. Now, when you're playing left tackle, you're kicking back with your left leg, which is not his bad leg. It's not his bad knee. So he looks a lot more comfortable at being a left tackle. He doesn't have quite the athleticism that you want, but he has great length that kind of makes up for that. He's got long arms, and he did a hell of a job. He got beat on one play by Olivier Vernon, but mostly he stonewalled him that whole game. And keep in mind, that Giants D-line has a lot of money tied up into it. We mentioned Snacks Harrison. Pierre-Paul just got a deal. Vernon just got a deal. So this is a very expensive D-line that they were going against. I thought it was going to be a good test. And the Bills O-line, especially the backups, looked really well. One name that sticks out to me, Kyle, and I keep preaching about him, is Jarrell Worthy, number 94. He looks like a man on a mission. He was a former second-round pick from the Packers in 2012 who had a first-round grade on him. A lot of people thought he was going to go in the late first round. And he's been bounced back, and he seems to be really focused, Kyle. He said this year he's more focused than ever. He knows that his job's on the line. And I'm telling you right now, I know losing Marcell for the first 4 games is going to hurt, but these young guys, Worthy, Washington, and even Kyle Legier-Douzable, Kyle, he looks really good in Rex Ryan's scheme. I know a lot of people were giving flack. He didn't look good in Bowles' scheme last year, but
no, he was fine. I didn't say that. No, listen, Legier-Douzable was a nice role player for the Jets, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what he'll be for the Bills. He's just a guy that's going to come in there, and he actually, I was watching Jets tape, I guess, when they played the Jaguars. Kyle, Legier-Douzable does a lot of cool things that kind of frees up other defensive linemen. I remember he took a guard. He was lined up shade over the center. He took a guard, and he tugged on the guard's jersey, and he drove the guard into the tackle and kind of knocked the tackle off balance. And Muhammad Wilkerson was able to loop around, and it was either Mo Wilkerson or Sheldon Richardson. I can't think of who it was, but they were able to loop around and get what's his name, the quarterback from the Jaguars,
Bortles.
I don't know why I had a brain fart. And
he sucks.
Yeah, you're not a big fan of his. And
no, he's easily the most overrated quarterback in the league.
Well, yeah. And I tend to agree with you. Either way, I think that Legier-Douzable's play is kind of like an unnoticed one, that he kind of does a lot of the dirty work, and the guys around him kind of get a lot of the shine. But I really like Legier-Douzable.
Yeah, I do too.
And, like I said, I think Adolphus Washington stuck out to me. And there's another kid by the name of Bryson Albright. He was
Big Bird.
The Big Bird. He's got great length. He's got a motor that keeps going. I really liked his play, Kyle. You mentioned Seymour. And I really enjoyed that Bills game. I think their defense seems like I remember watching Bills games last year, and I think you can attest to this, that they just looked confused before the play began. They were out there, and they're just talking to each other, and they're making all these hand signals. This year, the Bills' defense looks kind of set. Like, they make a few calls, and then they're in their stance ready to go. I remember last year, they're waving their hand, and the ball snapped, and they're kind of like, oh, what do we do now? This year, they look like they got a little bit better communication, and Tyrod Taylor looked great.
Yeah, you're 100% right about the defense, but I would say pump the brakes with that a little bit, and here's why I would say that is you're not game planning in the preseason, so
I get that. But
so
even
when
in
you
the
have,
preseason,
but in the regular season though, you're going to have much more in-depth game plans, which is going to be a little bit tougher for a player to remember rather than just running basic plays. So there could still then be confusion.
I smell what you're cooking, Kyle. But even in the preseason last year, they looked confused. I think there's more continuity. And also doesn't hurt that you're getting players like Legier-Douzable that are familiar with the system. You bring in David Hawthorne, who's used to Rob Ryan's system. So you got a lot of veterans in there that kind of can relate to the younger guys. This is what you're supposed to do. And this is another year that all those veterans that we had last year in this system. So I'm a little bit more optimistic about the communication. If it's not going to be excellent, it's definitely going to be improved.
Yeah. Let's do this really quick, and we apologize for not going as much into the Patriots this week as we would like to. But a couple things that stood out to me from this Patriots game is Jimmy Garoppolo had an interceptable pass. It wasn't intercepted, dropped by the defender in the end zone, hit the defender right in the hands. He just didn't capitalize on it. Again, that's another question mark about Jimmy. Chris Hogan, he had a nice 15-plus yard catch, maybe closer to 20 yards, but he bobbles it right on the sideline. Again, shows those uncertain hands. he did then have a 2-point conversion. A.J. Derby, the tight end, I think he cemented his roster spot. He had a nice touchdown catch. He had several other nice catches, particularly down the sideline. He took a huge hit but hung on to the ball, so that was really nice. Cyrus Jones had a really nice pick where he read Brian Hoyer and basically, he telegraphed the play so great that he was able to cut the defender off or go behind the defender and intercept the pass. I guess Brian Hoyer stared it down all the way, but still, that's really good to see from a young corner. And let's see. And also Brandon Bolden had a terrible fumble, which was recovered by the Bears, which again shows you that you don't want to keep this guy at major reps at running back. He's mostly a special teams player.
Yeah, and Kyle, one thing about Jimmy G is that a lot of Bills fans, and I kind of poked fun of this too on Twitter, is that he's the new captain checkdown. He did not like throwing the ball downfield. I don't know if that was by design, but it only seemed like he was going for those small routes and those just checking into the running back. That's one thing I definitely took away from that game. Kyle, Terrence Knighting, a guy I thought it was a big signing for them, a guy who's a run plugger. I don't think he's going to make this roster. He just looked terrible. No explosive. He just looks bigger than ever. I don't know if there's going to be a spot for him, especially they drafted Malcolm Brown, Alan Branch, et cetera, and then the Valentine kid out of Nebraska.
But he hasn't looked very good either, though.
I get that, but he's the younger player. I think that, Terrence Knighting is someone they're looking to lean on, and it doesn't seem like they can.
No, and they actually gave him a nice chunk of change, too. And the Patriots, they do have a little bit of money, so, they're not going to really regret that signing bonus that they gave to him. But, it kind of makes you wonder, because they did this a couple years ago with Sean Ellis. He never really flashed in the preseason, but they gave him a nice chunk of money, and you have to wonder, because you gave him that money, is that all the more reason that you kept him on the roster? And I believe that Christian, when he was co-hosting PFW in Progress, that he said that was one of the reasons why the Patriots probably kept Sean Ellis around, is because they gave him that nice chunk of change. And it just makes you wonder if the Patriots might do the same thing with Knighton.
And lastly, I know we got to wrap this up, is Kyle, Aaron Dobson. We were actually singing his praises in camp. We were talking about how he beat Butler and he was making him look like a fool. Here's a time where he could really collect that outside job. You got all these shifty inside guys on this one reception, 10 yards. He's got to step it up. If this might be his last shot in the Patriots uniform this week.
Yeah, I think his time is up. He flashed, but then he came back to being the same old Aaron Dobson, and if the Patriots have learned their lesson, they will part ways with him. But that'll do it for this edition of the AFC East Bros podcast. Kyle and Gary, you want to call in, just as some of the awesome callers did tonight, 712-451-0011. The PIN number is 321-848. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, all that good stuff. Kyle and Gary, follow me on Twitter, AFC East Bros, and Gary is AFC_EastBro Gary. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.